Let's watch this little video clip to see how anxious reactions work. Now that commercial is an updated version of a very old joke. However, it is a good illustration of both the value and the dangers of being anxious and reactive. The fellow who puts on the tennis shoes has increased his chances of personal survival. That may be a very good thing. He has also, however, been quite willing to sacrifice his associate to the hungry lion. In an anxious system, individual members will have no hesitation to sacrifice another member of the system if that results in a greater chance of individual safety and survival. The problem in an anxious system, especially in an anxious congregation, is that anxiety can lead to what we might call organizational cannibalism. Consider this paragraph from Galatians 5, verses 14 and 15. For the whole law is summed up in a single commandment, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. If, however, you bite and devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another. The word in verse 15 for bite is a word that describes how animals tear up flesh. It is a bloody, brutal word. The word Paul uses for devour really means to prey upon someone or something. It can also mean to exploit another for one's own benefit. In an anxious system, members may abandon one another to the pursuing lion of fear, thinking they only have to outrun their neighbor. If that doesn't relieve the anxiety, members may turn on one another and begin to prey upon one another emotionally and in other ways. What may have been a useful skill on the savannah with a lion at your heel becomes suicidal behavior in the congregation. The problem is not anxiety itself. The problem comes when we are so anxious to make ourselves feel safe that we refuse to do anything good. In severely conflicted congregations, we become so anxious that we begin to engage in actively destructive behaviors. Now, when that happens, what is actually going on? Let's talk for a few moments about what I like to call the brains of a fight. Research into how the brain works has given us some insights into the nature of our anxious behavior. When we're feeling safe and secure, we spend time in our neocortex. It's called the neocortex because in physical terms it's the newest part of the human brain. This is where we make conscious judgments. The neocortex is where we exercise creativity. It's where we are most human in our thinking. On the other end of the scale is what many have called the lizard brain. The lizard brain is concerned with survival. It sits at the base of the skull, at the top of the spine, right back here. It's our old brain. The lizard brain's reaction to everything is limited to the most basic animal instincts: eat, attack, run, mate. The focus of the lizard brain is survival. If we're running from lions, the lizard brain is a useful organ. If we're involved in a church fight, the lizard brain leads us to eat one another. Concerned with its own survival, the lizard brain has adopted a role as counselor for our social survival. But the lizard brain is not known for its finesse. In the lizard brain's world, things are either or, on, off, friend, foe. Very little differentiation or distinction or ambiguity. The lizard brain is not interested in deciding what is right or helpful or healthy. The lizard brain has only one agenda: to keep me from getting hurt. So it's not very useful in most human situations. Human situations are usually far too complicated for the simple on-off thinking of the lizard brain. Our lizard brain naturally makes snap judgments. That's a useful skill if you're running from a lion. It's a destructive tactic when you're trying to be the church. The only strategy the lizard brain knows is to react. Reaction uses up all of the available resources of our brains without producing anything helpful or creative, unless you think a lion is chasing you. Now, why does this matter? People who resist conflict are able to resist reactivity. They stay in their neocortex rather than going to their lizard brains. People who don't resist reactivity will find themselves in conflict most of the time, and they won't be able to figure out why. It was my first parish. I had been a pastor for about 2 years. The congregation received a sizable bequest. This was way over my head in terms of experience and expertise. Fortunately, I had some great church council leadership, and they figured things out. They developed a plan for how to use the bequest faithfully. The mistake they made was in having me present the plan at the congregational meeting. The plan itself was no problem. It was clearly laid out. Then it was time for questions and answers, and I began to sweat. A long-time member, wise, faithful, humble, he asked a simple question, and I don't even remember what the question was, but I remember the answer. Smart aleck that I was, I started out by saying, well, we may be dumb, but we aren't stupid. The rest of my answer was all right, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. The next week, that longtime member wasn't at worship. He was gone the next 3 weeks as well, and after a while, his good wife ran out of excuses. All she would say was, well, you need to talk to him. After a while, I finally mustered up the courage, and I did. Then all became clear. I had publicly shamed and embarrassed that poor man with my answer. He couldn't figure out what to do. After all, I was the pastor, so he decided to stay away from me. And that meant staying away from church. To his credit, he accepted my confession and apology and returned to church. What happened to me? One moment I was a fairly reasonable and intelligent young man, and the next I had become Godzilla, breathing fire on everyone around me. With every step I was pulverizing innocent feelings without even noticing that anyone got hurt. Well, that's how anxiety can work.